Christmas lights were still blinking when my life collapsed. No shouting, no argument, no warning. She waited until the food was cold, until the gifts were opened, until the house smelled like pine and false peace. Then she slid a folder across the table, picked up her coat, and walked out, leaving me broke, frozen, and erased. She said it was necessary, that I'd recover, that she had a plan. She was right about one thing. There was a plan. It just wasn't hers. My name is Michael Hayes, and until Christmas night, I believed loyalty was enough to build a life. We weren't rich, we weren't flashy, but we were stable. Or so I thought. For 12 years, I handled the parts of life nobody brags about. The bills, the savings, the long-term decisions that don't impress dinner guests but keep the lights on. My wife, Rachel, handled everything else. The image, the social circle, the constant upward comparison. She liked to say I was steady. At the time, I thought that meant dependable. I didn't realize it also meant replaceable. The signs were there long before Christmas. Shorter conversations, longer phone calls she took in other rooms, a sudden interest in finances she'd ignored for years. I asked once if something was wrong. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm just organizing things." She was telling the truth, just not the whole one. Christmas Eve felt normal, photos, laughter, a performance so convincing I didn't question it. Christmas Day was quiet, too quiet, and Christmas night, after the dishes were done, she ended everything with precision. The folder she handed me wasn't dramatic. No letters, no explanations, just documents, account changes, authorization removals, a separation agreement already signed. By the time I reached for my phone, my cards were declined. She didn't apologize. She said, "You'll land on your feet. You always do." Then she left, and in that moment, standing alone in a house I could no longer afford, I realized something terrifying. She hadn't acted emotionally, she'd acted strategically, and people who plan that carefully always assume the person they're destroying won't survive long enough to respond. She was wrong. The house didn't feel empty after Rachel left. It felt neutral, like a place that had already accepted I no longer belonged in it. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the folder she'd left behind. The Christmas tree was still lit in the corner, blinking cheerfully, unaware that the foundation underneath everything had just been ripped out. I didn't open the folder right away. I already knew what I'd find, because the bank alerts told the story faster than paperwork ever could. Savings, inaccessible. Joint checking, zeroed out. Credit line, frozen. My name, quietly removed. Not stolen from, unlinked. That distinction mattered. She hadn't committed a crime. She'd committed an execution. I sat down at the table where we'd eaten dinner less than an hour earlier. The plates were still stacked in the sink. 2 wine glasses, one half full, one untouched. Mine. I remembered the way she'd watched me drink earlier. Calm, observant, like she was memorizing something she wouldn't see again. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. She hadn't blocked me. She didn't need to. People who think they've won don't waste energy defending themselves. I opened the folder. Everything was labeled, highlighted, time-stamped. She'd been planning this for months. New accounts in her name, a trust I'd never heard of, a legal separation agreement drafted by a firm I didn't recognize. The signature is at the bottom. The space for mine blank. She didn't need it yet. The agreement assumed I'd sign once I panicked, once I begged, once I realized how exposed I was. I leaned back in my chair and laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood the mistake she'd made. Rachel believed that money was power, and for a long time she'd been right. But she forgot something critical. Power isn't money. Power is knowledge. And I knew things about our life she'd never bothered to learn. The first night, I didn't sleep. Not from shock, but from calculation. I listed everything she'd taken, then everything she hadn't. My job was still mine, my reputation untouched, my name still clean, and most importantly, she'd assumed I didn't understand the systems I helped maintain. She thought stability meant ignorance. By morning, I'd already made 2 decisions. The first was simple. I wasn't calling her. The second was harder. I wasn't fixing this immediately, because reacting fast would tell her she still controlled the tempo. Instead, I went to work. On December 26th, while everyone else was posting leftovers and holiday photos, I sat at my desk like nothing had happened. My manager noticed. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just tired." He believed me. Everyone always did. That day, I reviewed contracts I'd helped negotiate years earlier, read clauses I'd once skimmed because I trusted the person I was married to. That trust had cost me, but it had also taught me exactly where the leverage was buried. By the end of the day, I knew 3 things Rachel didn't. She'd overextended herself. She'd assumed I'd stay quiet. And she'd built her escape on timelines that didn't account for resistance. That night, I finally received a message, not an apology, an instruction. "I know this is hard, but please don't do anything emotional. Let the lawyers handle it." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back 3 words. "Understood. Take care." She replied with a heart emoji. That's when I knew. Whatever she thought she'd destroyed, she hadn't even touched the part of me that fights back. The most dangerous thing Rachel ever did was assume I would panic. Panic makes people sloppy, predictable, easy to manage. I did the opposite. I slowed down. For the next week, I lived like a ghost in my own life. Same routine, same commute, same neutral expressions. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not friends, not family, not coworkers. Silence was protection and leverage. I watched her instead. Not directly, indirectly. Her social media went quiet for the first time in years. No photos, no captions, no motivational quotes about choosing yourself. That told me everything. People who win loudly want to be seen. People who win quietly are still checking their footing. On the 5th day, her lawyer emailed mine, except I didn't have one yet. The message came directly to me. Polite, formal, efficient. They outlined next steps, suggested mediation, proposed a timeline for asset division based on the assumption that I'd cooperate. They assumed I'd sign. They assumed wrong. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled records Rachel didn't realize I still had access to. Not bank accounts, not passwords, history, email threads from years earlier, meeting notes, documents I'd reviewed for her projects when we were still married. I wasn't snooping. I was remembering. And memory is dangerous when paired with patience. I noticed patterns. Transactions routed through shell entities, transfers timed around holidays and quarter ends, legal language copied from templates that weren't meant to be used the way she'd use them. Nothing illegal on its own, but together, it formed a picture. Rachel hadn't just left me. She'd leveraged our marriage as cover. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me precise. The next call I made wasn't to a lawyer. It was to a forensic accountant I'd worked with years earlier, someone who specialized in untangling clean exits that were only clean on the surface. I didn't explain the story. I sent documents. He replied 2 hours later, "This is interesting." That was all he wrote. Over the next 2 weeks, I let Rachel believe her plan was working. I didn't contest the separation, didn't freeze accounts, didn't demand explanations. I signed nothing, but I resisted nothing either. She mistook my stillness for surrender, her second mistake. Behind the scenes, the picture sharpened. Money moved through entities that hadn't been disclosed. Timing overlapped with insider information she shouldn't have had access to. And a trust, set up in her name, had beneficiaries that didn't match what she'd claimed in court filings. Not criminal, but close enough to make people nervous. The kind of nervous that leads to questions. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Rachel. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "Make sure you're handling things." "I am," I replied. A pause. "I know this feels sudden," she continued, "but I think in time you'll see it was necessary." Necessary, the word people use when they don't want to say self-serving. "I trust the process," I said. That seemed to reassure her. She hung up lighter than she'd called. That night, I sent one email. Not to her. To a regulatory body that existed for one reason only, to ask uncomfortable questions when financial structures became too clever. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I simply requested clarification, attached documentation, asked whether certain disclosures were required under current guidelines. Then I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up broke. But for the first time since Christmas night, I was in control. Because when someone builds their escape on secrecy, all it takes is light in the wrong place to turn momentum into collapse. And Rachel had no idea how much light was about to shine. The first sign something was wrong came quietly. Rachel stopped posting. No updates, no curated optimism, no carefully angled proof that she was thriving. People who are winning don't go silent. They announce. 3 days after I sent the inquiry, my phone rang at work. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then a third time. I waited until lunch. "Michael," Rachel said when I finally picked up. Her voice was steady but thinner. "Have you talked to anyone recently?" "No," I replied. "Why?" A pause. "I've had a few calls," she said carefully. "People asking questions about things that are already handled." Already handled, the phrase people use when they want reassurance more than truth. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said. "If everything's in order." She exhaled slowly. "Yes, of course." But she didn't sound convinced. Over the next week, the questions multiplied. Her lawyer called mine again, this time less polite, more urgent. They suggested accelerating mediation, finalizing terms, putting this behind us. They wanted closure. I wanted clarity. Behind the scenes, the forensic accountant sent updates, each message more precise than the last. "They'll ask about this. This timing doesn't align. This disclosure is incomplete. No accusations, just pressure points." Rachel called again, this time late at night. "I don't understand why this is happening," she said. "Everything was clean." "Clean," I repeated, "or quiet?" She didn't answer. That silence told me more than anything else. The truth was unraveling, not because I attacked her, but because she'd built her exit, assuming no one would ever look closely. That assumption was her third mistake. By the end of the month, she was no longer calling to check on me. She was calling to extract information. "What do you know?" she asked once, finally dropping the calm tone. "Enough," I said. "Did you report something?" "I asked a question," I replied. "There's a difference." Her breathing changed, sharper now, faster. "You're trying to ruin me," she said. "No," I corrected. "I'm letting your plan speak for itself." She hung up without saying goodbye. That same week, her employer placed her on administrative leave, not because of wrongdoing, because of risk. Institutions don't wait for guilt. They wait for doubt. And once doubt enters the room, confidence doesn't matter anymore. I found out through a mutual contact. "She's furious," he said, and scared. I felt neither satisfaction nor anger, just confirmation, because this was never about revenge. It was about balance. Rachel had believed she could erase me quietly. What she hadn't accounted for was the weight of a person who stops reacting and starts observing. The final message from her lawyer came 2 days later. They wanted to renegotiate everything. Assets, terms, language. They framed it as fairness. I recognized it for what it was. Damage control. I replied with a single sentence. We can discuss once all disclosures are complete. No threats. No deadlines. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. And somewhere, Rachel was realizing the truth that arrives too late for people who plan exits instead of endings. When you destroy someone quietly, you give them time to become exact. And exactness ruins illusions. The first headline didn't mention my name. That's how I knew it was real. When reputations fall quietly, the story always starts somewhere adjacent. An audit, a compliance review, a temporary leave. Language designed to soothe investors while signaling something is deeply wrong. Senior finance executive placed on leave pending internal review. No accusations, no details, just uncertainty. And uncertainty is poison to people who built their lives on control. Rachel called me that night, not rehearsed this time, not measured, raw. This is spiraling, she said. You don't understand what this is doing to me. I understand exactly, I replied. You're enjoying this, she accused. No, I said calmly. I'm surviving it. There was a long pause. Then her voice dropped. What do you want? That was the moment. Not when she left. Not when she drained the accounts. But now, when she realized I wasn't reacting anymore. I want everything disclosed, I said. Not to me, to everyone who should have seen it the first time. That could destroy me, she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. You destroyed me on Christmas night, I said. This is just math catching up. She hung up. The following weeks were brutal for her. Banks froze secondary accounts pending clarification. Legal teams revised statements. Her employer terminated her contract without admission of fault. That phrase again. People use it when the damage is already done. Friends stopped calling her, not because they believed the worst, but because proximity to uncertainty is dangerous. The life she'd curated, the dinners, the invites, the image, collapsed under the weight of questions no one wanted to answer out loud. She tried to meet. I declined. She tried to negotiate. I insisted on transparency. She tried to frame herself as the victim. That one almost made me smile. In the end, the divorce settlement was rewritten entirely. Assets returned, terms revised, language softened, but consequences permanent. I didn't win in the way people imagine. There was no dramatic courtroom moment, no public apology, just erosion, quiet, relentless. The kind that leaves nothing standing but facts. The final message I received from Rachel came months later. No blame, no anger, just one sentence. I thought leaving you would set me free. I read it once, then deleted it. Because freedom built on deception always demands repayment. And Rachel had paid in full. By the time everything settled, the world had already moved on. That's how it always works. Scandals fade, names disappear from headlines. People stop asking questions once the answers become inconvenient. Rachel faded with them, not erased, just removed. The job she'd built her identity around was gone. The network that once amplified her had gone silent. The confidence she wore so easily before had nowhere left to anchor itself. She tried to rebuild. I know that because people talk quietly, cautiously. She took consulting work under a different title, avoided attention, learned how to exist without applause. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. The consequences were already permanent. As for me, I didn't become rich overnight. I didn't reinvent myself publicly. I didn't chase vindication. I rebuilt slowly, methodically. The same way I always had. I downsized, simplified, focused on work that valued consistency over flash. People at my job noticed something different. Not the betrayal, not the fallout, but the steadiness. When systems broke, I fixed them. When pressure rose, I stayed calm. When others panicked, I didn't. Eventually, opportunity followed. Not because I demanded it, because reliability has a way of outlasting chaos. Years later, I heard Rachel had moved cities again, not running this time, just adjusting. Someone asked me once if I ever regretted not forgiving her. I thought about it, then said the truth. I forgave her the moment I stopped trying to explain myself. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation, it's release. And release is power. I never saw her again. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that Christmas. The lights, the folder, the quiet precision of her exit. She believed she was ending my life. What she really did was remove herself from it. And that changed everything. Because when someone destroys you, believing you won't recover, they never prepare for what happens when you do. They never imagine the weight of their own choices coming back. Not loudly, not violently, but patiently, relentlessly. Rachel left me broke on Christmas night. What she did next destroyed her life, not because I chased revenge, but because I stopped protecting the lie she built her freedom on. And sometimes, that's all it takes.